All right, everyone. Well, I think we'll get started here. So, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Berkheimer. I'm a technology specialist here at FarmQA, and I'm really excited to be talking to you this afternoon about doing variable rate applications in your FarmQA account. We're going to be focusing on the workflow that can take your soils data, turn those into management zones, and ultimately write prescriptions off of those. Before we get started, we have a couple housekeeping items that I wanted to jump into. First and foremost, we're going to talk about some upcoming events that we have. The big one that we have is our third annual Farm QA Day event is going to be coming up next month. It's going to be November 18th and 19th in Fargo, North Dakota. This is our first year of doing a 2-day event. It's going to start on noon the 18th and move into the 19th. And it's going to be a great 2-day event filled with information about how to use FarmQA as well as what's coming up in the app. So we're really excited to be offering you not only trainings for both you and your new users, but we're also excited to share with you the vision of what's coming in FarmQA. It's also a fantastic opportunity for everyone to come together and share how they use the app. There's a bunch of great conversations between great FarmQA users that happen here. So we'd be super excited to see you at this event next month. We do have earlier pricing available right now. It is $99 to register for the event. That's going to end on October 24th. So make sure that you get registered for that. We would love to see you up in Fargo for Farm QA Day. Otherwise, to our virtual offerings, we are continuing our webinar series next month on November 11th, where we're going to go through our planning functionality. So Sheila's going to be taking us through how we go build crop plans, apply those to fields, and how that can save us time as you move throughout your year after you've created them. And then we're going to wrap up our webinar series this year on December 9th with a What's New, talking about all of our new features we've been working hard on, as well as what's going to be coming next in FarmQA next year. So with that, we're going to move into talking about what we're going to be covering today in this webinar. So the first thing we're really going to be talking about is how to take our soils data and how to build management zones off of that. That's kind of our first base functionality in regards to getting our zone maps created. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're then going to go more into how we can turn those into prescriptions and how those can be shared with your users, or to make them more usable, like putting them into JDOps to be able to go and get those applied in the field, and then other ways to share these as well. We understand that they're not just meant to be shared digitally or viewed within FarmQA. We also want these to be easily shareable with your growers. So we'll talk about great ways for you to communicate this with your grower base as well. So with that, we're going to hop right into the live demo here. And for this demo, I'm going to be working mostly in one of my demo fields in my FarmQA account. A couple things to note about this field. When I click on this here in the home page, and when I hop down into my layers, you can see that I already have a bunch of soils data loaded in here. So it's important to remember that with your soils data, make sure that you bring that in before you start the process of creating management zones. So you'll be able to upload your previously existing soil locations as well as your soils data. Once that's in, we can really dive into this process of creating your management zones and writing these prescriptions. So when I come over here to the soils page and click on this field, we can take a look at all the data that I have available to us. So mostly nitrogen data, potassium, phosphorus, all these soil test results we would normally expect to see. So once I verify that I have this information in here, I can start with the process of creating these zones. Now, one thing to note with creating management zones and prescriptions, it is a one field at a time process. We do have a couple things built in that'll help save you some time as we move through this. One thing with that is going to be creating some profiles for you. So what a profile is, if you come over here to fields and then layer profiles, you're able to create these profiles to set up how you want your zones to look before you start creating them. This will save you a lot of time in the setup process for actually getting these guys off the ground. So I'm going to go in, create a new zone creation profile. I'm going to call this demo test, just to give it a name. Now you can see over here on the right-hand side, we can have this bring in either numeric or text-based data. For your soils data, this will all be numeric type, when you think about your soil test results, organic matter, quantities, nitrogen, all that kind of fun stuff. For text, this would be if you have more, let's think about like a soil map, for example, where you have like all the different names for each soil series. That would be a situation where we would want to have it be text-based or something along those lines. But for the most part, we're dealing with numeric data here. Next, I'm able to set up the labels that I want to see, as well as my color ramp that I can use. And I can even toss in the zone breaks, which is going to be one of the best places for me to kind of get this started. So for example, here I can say for all of my tests that I'm doing here, I want to have 5 zones set up, and I want to start by using the equal interval clustering algorithm. Tends to be the most straightforward of our clustering algorithms. For these, we have equal interval, quantile, natural break, custom, and zone per shape. The equal interval is just going to take your data set and it's just going to chop it up into as many zones as we have set out. So for example here, since I have 5 zones, the equal interval algorithm is going to set it up into 5 distinct zones that I'll be looking at in my zone map. For quantiles, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to order the data, and then we're going to put them into individually spaced bins. So what that means is that kind of like if you have, as opposed to just kind of layering everything out 0 to 100, for example, and saying that that's my range, which we would do with the quantile method, we would look at the total quantity within each of those bins. So if you had like 20 results that had a value of 20, 5 results with a value of 50, and then 1 result with a value of 100 or something along those lines, we would space those out a lot more evenly based on how many 20s we had, as opposed to just like breaking them up by each of those individual values. We also have natural breaks. So we look for natural breaks in your data set. You can kind of think about like where certain peaks and valleys would be as we sort of separate that out a little bit. And then zone per shape is really good if you're bringing in pre-existing management zones. So a great use case for this, kind of like I said earlier, if you're bringing in a zone from a different tool, what you'd be able to do is drop it in, say, hey, I already have these zones set up. I want to do zone per shape. We would get that set up for you rather efficiently. But like I said, we'll just start with equal interval. Pretty great place to start. You can tweak these as you kind of go through the process. And I can also set a minimum polygon size. So when you're thinking about applying these, some of your data gets really granular and you can have like these really tiny zones that you're never going to be able to apply. We can get around that by saying, you know what, I want my minimum polygon size to be 1 acre for each of these. So as we go through that process, we're going to be able to make these much more larger applicable zones and just have that set up here. Once I'm good with this, I can click Save. And now I have this new layer profile that I can stamp onto all my zones as I create those. So to show you how this works, I'm going to come back to Soil, click on the field I'm working with, and we're going to click on the Create Management button here at the top of the screen. This is then going to bring us into our zone designer where we're going to be able to kind of get things started here. Now, at the very top of my screen over here, you can see I have this Apply Profile button. When I click on this, I can then select the profile that I want to bring in. I want to bring in my demo test. And now we can see that things are already set up for me the way that I had them previously. I've brought in that I want to have 5 total zones here, set my minimum polygon size, and I'm also showing the labels for each of my zones. The next important thing that you're going to want to do is come over here under data and you're going to want to select the attribute to bring in. So I can click on this drop down and I can see all the soils data that I have that I can create attributes based off of. So for example here, I already have this set as N0 to 6. If this is the zone I want to create, awesome. And then I can create phosphorus, potassium, all those kind of guys going down as we kind of go through this. A couple things that I really like to do here is I can start checking my data before I go in and really start creating these zones. A great place to do this is right here next to the attribute dropdown. You can click on this graph and we're going to give you that breakdown of your zone data. So what this is showing me is that at each of these points, it shows my value and it kind of graphs out that range here. So sort of to what I was talking about earlier, you can see that we have a total range of 42 to 58 in this field for my topsoil nitrogen. And then I have a couple extra values at some of these spots. So I have 2 locations where I had a result around 50 pounds per acre, 2 results around 55, and then 2 around 45. What this is going to do is this is going to start to kind of show how my data set's distributed. So we can see here that if I go for an equal interval style method, we're just going to have breaks here at like the 42, 46, 52, etc. But if I'd rather kind of shape it more based on how the data set is shaped, I might want to go under here and click on natural breaks as my clustering algorithm, because that's going to pick up on these parts of the data set where like, oh, you have a lot of values that are in this range. We might want to cluster that and make that a zone as opposed to just kind of spreading everything out really evenly. So I would definitely recommend checking this to see if this kind of get an idea of what your data set looks like before moving in here. Another cool thing that we can do here is you can see under this, we have this features option where it says I have 16 of 16 I'm using right now. That's just showing which of these points I'm considering whenever I'm actually writing my management zones. So when I click on this edit icon, I can go in and I can start unchecking some of these values if I want to. This is really good if there's like a spot that you don't want to consider for your management zone. That can be based on where it's ended up being located, or if the values look like really off to you for some reason. I think a good example in this field would be this 45 value. Let's say that kind of this area is something that I don't really want to consider whenever I'm creating these zones. I can just check this value off, and then that's not going to be included as I go through and actually write this. I can click this update button. And then now, as we can see, I'm not considering that point. That's not going to be a part of my management zone as I go through and create those. Next, I can click on create. And now I have my first iteration of my management zone that's going to be created here. What I can do over here now is I can come over to the right-hand side of the screen and I can start to see some of the breakdowns of my zones. I like being able to come down here under the summary, and you can kind of see your breakdown of zone by acreage across your field. So we can see here about a third of our field is going to be under this zone 3, another third or so plus under this zone 4, and then everything else is kind of split up between 1, 2, and 5. Nice way to kind of see those breakdowns. Now, there's a few things we can do here if after looking at this, we're like, you know what, there's a couple edits I want to make to this zone here. It's not quite how I want things. What we can do is I can come over here under natural breaks. I can click custom. Now when I'm under custom, I'm going to have access to this view and edit breaks option. So this is another great way to kind of view my data set. So I can kind of see, where some of these breaks are popping up and how I can kind of switch things around. There's two ways you can really use this menu to kind of update your zones. So for example, let's say, you know what, I don't really want to consider some of this stuff down here. I'm going to lump all of this data into zone 1. Say I want to make this zone 2. And that can be 3, 4, and 5. I can then click Update Zones. And now we're going to redraw this map based on those updates that I made. So now you can see we've completely changed our zone map because I was able to go through and edit these breaks over here. Another option as well, if you don't kind of want to go visually off of the data, you can also come over here to the list and you can see under each of my zones what all of my break values are going to be. So let's say based on the state recommendations that I'm working off of, I want to make zone 1 is going to be anything under 42. Zone 2 is anything under 50, 55, and then we'll just do 60 and 70. There we go. Now we can click on Update Zones here again. And now, once again, my map is going to be redrawn kind of based on these recommendations that I have. Now, if you think that you've kind of gotten to this point where like, you know what, this isn't what I'm looking at all. I kind of want to go back to how things were originally. You can click on View and Edit Breaks and revert. Oh, yeah, okay, we'll revert there. And that'll take you back to your last save point. There are points where if you kind of do get really messed up on this and really just want to go back, you can just go delete the zone, come back and get started again. Again, it's going to be easier with that apply profile button. We can just come through and get restarted. So I'm going to come through, do some quick break edits here and update. Now there's a few other edits we can make to our zones as we go through here. I like to go through these pieces at the top for editing zones. So for example, I have this change zone option. This is a great way to be able to go through and just bulk reassign zones from one to another. So as of right now, we have zone 1 selected, but let's say that we want to take some of these guys around zone 1. It's like, you know what, that really shouldn't be zone 3, that should be zone 2. We can get those rewritten. So I can come through, click zone 2, and I can click in these zones, and then those will be rewritten like so. So I'm going to change a couple of these guys, and I'm going to switch up into zone 3 here. And we can just kind of click around and then edit our zones like so. Once you're done with this, you can click OK, and then we'll save those changes to your zones as well. Another option that we have up here is our grid alignment. How we like to think about the grid alignment is it can be a little difficult initially for you to actually apply these zones whenever you're in the field, working in an actual applicator situation. So what we want to do is that we can kind of break these down by grids. So for example, I'm breaking this down by 47 by 47 foot grids right now. In this situation, this is about the width of my sprayer. So whenever I'm actually applying this, it will be going based on what my sprayer has going on. So what I can do here is I can kind of align my grid by clicking on this middle circle button and kind of dragging it around like so. So it's aligned just well. Also, based on the direction you might be going in, you can also align it that way. So let's say that I'm going to be driving this kind of from a northeast to a southwest perspective. I can click on the edge, drag, and then reorient this like so. So now we can see I've sort of aligned my grid going in that direction. Something to note too, it can take a little while for this to update. This is a lot of information we're throwing at FarmQA. So definitely make sure you give this a minute as you're going through and getting this all set up. We can also go between feet and meters here. So based on whatever system you want to use, that's also an option for being able to generate your grid sizes. But whenever I'm ready, I can click OK. And then we're going to start to chop this up and break this down based on these grids here. Because yeah, what's happening basically is that we're redrawing all of our zones here. So you can think about this now instead of having, what might be about a dozen or so polygons in here, one for each zone. We're breaking this down into a few hundred smaller individual grids. So now each of those grids can sort of act as a mini zone with its own zone value. And we'll kind of talk through what that's going to do to editing it and applying this once we're actually able to go through and apply this grid. There's also a few other options we have for editing our zones here. We'll be able to go through that as well once we get this guy updated here in just a minute. All right. So first fun thing that we see here is that there's now a label on each of these small polygons. We can go turn those off to make it a bit easier to see. But as you can see now, everything is broken up based on these grids here. So to give you an idea of how this is working, I'm going to click on change zone again. And let's say that I want to go through and I want to smooth out this zone here, for example. I can come through, say I want to make this zone 3. I can start to apply that on some of these polygons. So now I can just click on these individually. And I can sort of redraw my zone here as an example. And I can click save. So now you can see that's sort of how we're thinking about this zone map now. It's not just these bigger polygons, we have these smaller individual polygons we're working with here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this as grid test. And I'm going to come through here and I'm going to make another zone map to show you some of the other draw tools that we have available to you. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to create another management zone. We're going to apply the same profile we made earlier. And we're going to come through and we're going to make another nitrogen test based off of this. So it looks like that my profile has been applied. So I'm going to come through here. We're going to do topsoil nitrogen. We're going to call this nitrogen demo. And I'm going to create these zones again. Now at the top here, in addition to grid alignment, we have a bunch of different split options as well. So when I click on split, I have the option to see the grid alignment again, but I also have image and shape options to kind of split my zones up. So what the image alignment does is you can go through and use another image that's associated with this field to sort of split up and redraw these zones. So what I have here is a zone map I made earlier called half and half. It's pretty straightforward. It's just going to be a map that just splits the field down in two. So when we see this overlaid on my field, we see that I now have an east half and a west half to my field overlaid here. And if I'm happy with this split here, I can click OK. And now we can see that I have this line that's bisecting my field here. This is going to split these zones up. So now I have these two zone 2 polygons. I'm going to give you an idea of how this will work. I can recategorize this zone over here back as zone 3, and then I have that split nice and even down here as well. Click OK. And then now I have this split down here for the field. So another example here is I can go through and I can take another zone map that I have. For example, I have this NDVI zone map from earlier, and it kind of shows where all these polygons and breaks are based on this NDVI map I have from earlier in the season. So I can click OK. And then again, we'll go through and we'll just split this up. So this is a great way for you to be able to combine maps. So for example, I can take a soils map here that would show soil series that I can use to break up these zones. I can have like an irrigation scheduling map that I have in here. If you have your own grids that you've brought in, where you have like much larger grids in the field, this would be a great place for you to come in and actually lay out this map. But then that'll help you kind of sample this field that way. So in addition to the image, we also have shapes that we can use to kind of break these guys up. So the big ones that we have are add polygon, add circle, and add line. For the add polygon, this is basically going to be us drawing in another zone into the map. So if I want to go ad hoc here, I can just draw another zone here now that I've selected that. Click OK. And now I have a new zone that I've just drawn here right in the middle of the field. I can go ahead, assign this a zone value, and that's good to go. It works very similarly for our circle option. So in addition to a more rough polygon, we can just go in and just add a circle by clicking the center, dragging out. And now we have a perfect circle in here that we can use and add that as a zone. And then our last piece that we have, once I create this, is going to be our line feature. So the line feature works very similarly to the image split that I did earlier. How this is going to work is I'm going to click add line. And what I can do is that I can start outside the polygon over here on one side of the field. Then I can draw in here, and I can draw a line through the field, click OK. And then that's going to draw another line splitting my field here. You can kind of see how these smaller polygons and zones are now split into two smaller sections. This doesn't have to be a straight line, so what I can do here is I can click split, shapes, lines, and I can sort of draw this how I want to split my field up. So as we can see, I kind of have this now sharper angle over here. And I can split this up and add a couple more zones here to my map. Now, once I think this looks good and I'm happy with all the splits and the changes that I've made, I can come over here and I can click save. And now this zone map has been saved here based off of these test results. So what I can do is I can come over to home, and we can access this right here from the home page or from your FarmQA mobile app. I think this is a great way for you to go sampling if you do want to keep this zone map with you. I can just come over here and see I have nitrogen demo, and then boom, I've got this zone map pulled up and it's accessible right from here. Another thing that we can do with this is, in addition to accessing this right from FarmQA, is we can go and export this to other platforms. So I can click export to shapefile, and I can click export in here. Note we have this collect geometries option. Basically, this is going to say that instead of saving each of these individual polygons as like a different shape in the file, it's going to combine everything into one big shape file. It just makes things easier for bringing it into other application tools. So I can click on collect geometries and go with export. Now I have the zip file that I can export, bring into JDOps, upload, and then you can share that and put that into your JDOps account or onto your monitor for future use. As you can see in here, we also have the option to create a prescription. So this is kind of where our prescription writer comes in handy. So I can click on create prescription here, and I can actually start to write this prescription for this field. Note that here I still have my profile option. So I can click on select profile. And what I can do here is that I can load in a pre-created profile into this prescription. So I'm going to click on urea and SMS for this one. What this does is that it's going to preload the products that I want to add into this right here. So we can see that I have urea and SMS as these two products that I want to put into this guy. To kind of show you how we do that, I'm going to throw this away for now. We're going to come to fields, back to layer profiles. And again, it's going to be down here in this prescription profiles option. So very similarly, I can just click add, and I can call this fertility. I can put down a color palette for how I want this to look. And I can start adding in my products here. So we're going to say this is going to have urea, potash, and let's just stick with those for now. Oops. If you do add too many products, you can just go and click delete over here. Once again, we have the number and the text option. For the most part, we're going to be using numeric values for these. And then for the precision, this is how many points after 0 you want to include in this prescription. So for example, let's say for urea, I only care about things to the nearest tenth. So if you're only like applying things in half pound, for example, we'd only would need to go to 0.5. So we would want a precision of 1 to have one place after the 0 for that. In potash, we'll likely want the same. So I can just set this to 1 and we'll click save. So now I have this fertility profile here that I can use, and we'll be able to go stamp that on as we create our prescriptions and kind of keep that process rolling. So I'm going to come back here, click on this guy. Now I'm going to go click on the zone map that I created, and I can click on create prescription. So like I said here, I just want to go stamp my profile. So I'm going to click select profile, fertility, and now I have these guys preloaded in here. What I can do now is that we see that on this page, I'm able to start writing this actual prescription for each of these zones here. I have my zones laid out in values 1 through 5. And we can also see what my zone values are here. So for example, my range for zone 1 is going to be 45 pounds per acre and below. And zone 5 is going to be 54 to 57 pounds per acre. So that's what we have going on here. And then I have my columns for my urea product and my potash product. What I'm going to be able to do is I can start putting in my actual application rates for all of these. So for example, let's say I want to put on in zone 1, 100 pounds per acre of urea. I have some information that's going to start to pop up down here, including my total per zone that I'm applying, and then my total for the entire field here. I can then go down. I can continue to apply these and just fill out these recommendations for this. Now I have this whole total put in here. What's nice that you can also do is, let's just say that I have the ranges here for potash. Let's say that on my low zone, we're put 200 pounds per acre, and in my high zone, we're just going to put in 50. What I can do now is I can put in this fill button, and it's going to autofill each of these in between, kind of going incrementally down in each step. What you can also do in here is that if you kind of mess things up or want to redo things, we can click clear, edit that out, and we can just go through and say, you know what, I kind of want to clear this up, and I want to do something more like this for my zones. Now, the other important thing that I like to point out is over here on the right-hand side of the screen under the map, we can give a title and a description to this prescription. So I can call this spring fertility, for example. Under my description, I can put in some of the rates as well. So for example, I'll put in urea is pounds per acre and potash is pounds per acre. This way we can put in the units so that whenever you're loading this into the actual monitor, you'll be able to move those units over and you can see how you'll be applying this guy. I can also click change colors here. So this is just going to allow me to redraw my map as needed. Range. And then when you're done, you can click on this save button, and this is going to save your prescription here. So a couple things to note about this: when you do save your prescription, it's not going to download automatically. We're going to move that over here to your prescriptions page. This is where you can access all of your previously created prescriptions in your FarmQA account. So what I can do here, check this box, and I can come up here to export. And now I have a few different options for how I want to save this. The big one is going to be exporting this to a shapefile. This is going to be how you're going to bring this into your John Deere Operations Center account. When I click on export, this will download right to a shapefile. Note that when this downloads, it is going to come in a format that is best for John Deere Operations Center. All of these shapefiles are going to be saved in a folder named RX. So you should be able to just upload that to JDOps, associate it with the field, and you'll be able to apply that rather easily here. Now, we can also share this as a PDF. So this is going to be great for creating field map books to be able to share with folks. And it's a great way to communicate this with your growers. So for example, I can click export here under this guy. And I can just kind of create this initial recommendation that I can share with my grower here. A lot of folks here are going to be familiar with this format. It's fairly similar to how we do some of our scouting reports. You'll be able to see some familiar information here. So at the top left, you'll be able to see I have my company logo, as well as the farm and field name that I am working with here. I also have a legal land description, which is going to be great if someone is going to be using this to navigate them to where they're going to be applying this recommendation. I also have information about what I'm applying, for example, here my urea and potash, and then who made this map as well. Another great navigation piece that I like is at the bottom of the map. Underneath it, you're going to see the latitude and longitude of this. So we're able to actually use this to navigate to this field as well. Now, at the very bottom, this is where a lot more of our relevant zone information is going to be coming in here. So for example, you can see all of the zones that I have, including the ranges that I've been using here. You can see the total area that's covered by each of these zones across the field, and then my rates per zone, and then my overall rate here for, my overall rate here that I'm applying in each of these zones. What I really like is that at the very bottom, you're able to see what your totals are. So for each of these fields, I now know what the total amount of urea and the total amount of potash that I'm going to need to apply these into these maps. So now that I have this information, you can both pass this on to your grower, or you could go through and you can say, hey, this is going to give me a good idea of what I'm going to need to be applying. Here is the product totals that I'll need. Now I need to know what I have to go bring shopping when you go to the co-op or whoever you're going to be getting your product from. Now, what's nice is that we're not only just able to do this for individual fields. When we come back over here, you can see that you can select any number of these prescriptions, and I can export all of these to one big PDF. Now, a couple things to note here is there is some manipulation we can do of how we're formatting this. So for example, under data, we can either provide details, a summary, or a details and summary. So if you do have some of these summary sections, we're going to be able to put this into this PDF as it goes through here. If you want to omit product totals or kind of change where we're showing them, we do have that option as well. So we'll say we want to show our product totals last on this. And if you do have prices associated with this, we can also load those prices in as well to give you a better example of what that shopping list is going to look like at the end of the day. Last but not least, we also have some changes in our map options. So for example, if we want to include a light map here and we want to change our header to just show the logo, we want to get to the recommendation quickly and just show you what's going on. That's going to be another option. And then we can also change the page size and the orientation. Now, when I export this sheet, it's going to look a little different from the last guy that we were able to put out here. So now when I take a look at this prescription, we can also see that I have this other bottom summary table popping up here. So first at the top, you can see that I'm omitting some of my field information. We're getting right here into the big map as we go down. But now I also have a breakdown of my products in the field. So this is just going to give me kind of an overall idea of what's happening across my field. What's nice about this is that you can easily see what your breaks are as well as your average application across the field, as well as giving us another place to find these product totals. So this table can be a bit easier for you to read, especially if you think about if we're applying, let's say 3 or 4 different products in this application, this first table is going to be a little busy. So it's really nice to have this second option to be able to say, hey, if you just need to see what's going on, here's a great place to be able to add in that information. Now, as we go down this list, we're able to do the same for all of these. Again, this is going to be a great place to display all of our product information that we're going to be applying for this one user. And now if you also had product pricing information as well with these, we'd be able to include that in a page as well. So definitely consider that as you're going through and writing these recommendations. As a reminder, you're able to go in here under advice, under products, and for any of these products, you're going to be able to add in a price for these. So let's say I'm using urea here, for example. Halfway down the page here, I'm able to put in a default rate, as well as a price per unit, as well as the totals that you want to be seeing for this. So if you're interested in seeing prices for all of your chemical products in your account, make sure to come in here and put those in on the products page. Also, if you do have another source for this and you want to be able to bring that in mass, we recommend sending over a CSV file with all that information to the FarmQA support team. We'd be able to then help you get that in and loaded into your account. Something else that I wanted to note quick, we talked about being able to create prescriptions right there from the home page. Note that you also have this option here from the fields page, just kind of a different place to access this workflow. So I can come down here under this field I was working in. I can then select it, and I can click on Create Prescription here at the top of the screen. This is going to bring me through the same workflow. I would just need to select the management zone that I would be going off of, as opposed to clicking the management zone first and then actually creating that. So I can click here on nitrogen demo, and I would go through the same process from this page. As you can see, at the end of the day, it's really going to be the same thing. Now, that's kind of our overview of our zone creation and prescription writer workflow. We've got some time here to go over some other use cases you guys might have. So are there any questions that you guys have about building your zones, writing prescriptions, and getting those sent off to your users?
There's nothing in the chat right now, but it looks like somebody is typing. So,
okay.
Oh, here we go. Can you export a PDF of zones before you make an RX?
Gotcha. So what we can do with your zones here, so do note that for your zones, they're all going to be living here under the management zone layers here. So when I click on this, our export options for this are going to be in a shapefile as of right now. Let me double check one thing in terms of getting our zone sent out. So I can click on the field, export to PDF. Gotcha. So as of right now, we're not able to get your zones exported to a PDF. That's just going to be to a shapefile. It can be a bit of a workaround, but you can take a screenshot of that management zone and then share that with folks. But that would be an option that we would have as of right now.
Okay. The other one is if you're doing prescriptions using the same products across several fields, is there a total product list at the bottom?
Yes. So that's kind of where we come in. Prescriptions, and I load in these prescriptions here. So I'm going to write a new prescription for a couple fields and kind of talk through that. So I can come in here. All right, and find some fields that have prescriptions. But basically what would happen is that if we're creating a field, if we're creating prescriptions for multiple fields, and we're using this same profile, so when I go in and select this fertility profile where I'm always using this for urea and potash, I'm going to write another prescription here. What we're going to be able to do is we can share that product totals list that I talked about earlier. So I'm just going to put some numbers in here, get this filled out. Fertility test 2. And I click save. I now have this second prescription created. So when I come in here, I can select these, export. Now I have this product totals list. So when I export this guy, I'll be able to show my product totals for these prescriptions here. Okay, so as of right now, our product totals are just going to be per field here at the bottom of the screen. And we're not going to have that product total list that you would want at the end of your PDF, sort of like how we do with our other recommendations. But that is definitely something we can look at. I know it gets a little tricky because we're currently setting up our products like so, where you're just putting in the text attribute. But this is definitely something that we can look at improving with our management zone creation. Were there other questions about creating management zones and prescriptions? Other use cases you guys wanted us to go through?
Right now, there's nothing else in the chat.
Okay, gotcha. As always, if you guys have questions, you can always reach out to the FarmQA support team. You can reach out to us at support@farmqa.com or call our direct line, and we'll be able to give you a hand with any of these features that we talked about or with other use cases you have for creating zones and writing prescriptions. And then, yeah, kind of like we said earlier, we have our FarmQA Day event coming up next month, as well as other webinars planned here in the near future. So please stay tuned for all those as we talk about what's coming up next with FarmQA. With that, I think we're good to wrap up here a little early. So thank you for coming, everybody. Really appreciate you showing up and learning more about our zone creation and prescription writer workflow. If you have any questions, like I said, please follow up with us. And again, thanks a bunch. Looking forward to seeing you at the next FarmQA webinar and at FarmQA Day in November.